The opinions, viewpoints, and beliefs presented on this program do not necessarily reflect those of the management, the affiliates and broadcast partners, or the sponsors. Listener discretion is advised.
And hello everyone, and welcome to Scarefest Radio. The original broadcast date is July 20th, 2018. We are in the short run-up, the home stretch, that's the word I'm looking for, the home stretch to the Scarefest 2018, Scarefest 11, Scarefest Rebirth. We are using our new streaming software, which is supposed to shoot it out all over the place, but I already see one of the periscopes isn't connecting, so what the hell. Hi everybody, I do want to welcome you to the show. Our guest tonight is Eric Brooks. Eric is on the line tonight, but first, my usual weekly gripe session. Okay, here's the thing. Everyone will notice that Brandon Griffith is on tonight's banner. I spoke to him earlier this week, and he was scheduled to co-host. Today, I find out he's in Tennessee on a family holiday. He's allowed to have a family holiday. Don't let me take anything away. I don't want to take any family time away from him. But you'd think that he'd remember to mention, oh, by the way, I'm going to be in Tennessee Friday. But this might have been something that came up. But anyway, so it's just me, it's just Eric, and it's just you out there in internet TV land. So, we do have, let's see here, we are going to have two celebrity announcements tonight, which is always a good thing. And while it's on my mind, if anybody knows Robin Jillian's, as far as I know, on the Scarefest 3-day passes that we give away on the radio, Robin Jillian's won on Twitter and is the only person that I have not gotten their email back and sent their passes out to. But if you have won a pass or thought you won a pass, get in touch with me and we'll see if we can get it straightened out. But as far as I know, all the passes have been sent out except for one, singular. We do have some introducing you to some return sponsors to the Scarefest tonight. We will also got a couple of new ones that we'll be introducing you to. And what it just reminded me over my shoulder, everybody, the weather is absolutely horrible. I live in a 100-year-old house. If the electric goes out, we're screwed. There is no backup plan. So, and if it starts raining real hard, it's a tin roof with like zero insulation. So I just want to get that out there. You might not be able to hear me. We might go off the air. It's a beautiful, beautiful night to try to do radio. Now, Eric, we'll get on over to you now. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Wes. It's great to be here. I'm really pleased to be able to do this. I appreciate you having me on.
Now, everybody, Eric Brooks is an Egyptologist in his spare time. He is also a museum curator in a museum that has nothing to do with Egypt, just so you know. But here's the bio from the website. Actually, it's not from the website. It's from the thing that Amber sent me. It's history, monuments, and mummies have provided fodder for filmmakers for all sorts for nearly 100 years. Eric Brooks, a professional museum curator and Egyptologist in his spare time, will take audience members on a journey into the past to explore how the great Egyptian has the bio's messed up. Anyway, so that's, I don't have time to decode this. Okay, let's get rid of that. So Eric, let's just go ahead and get the elephant out of the room. Did aliens, in fact, build the pyramids?
Absolutely, unequivocally not. That
Well,
simply did not happen.
damn. Well, damn. Did they? Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Did they not build the Great Pyramids, or did they not build any of the pyramids?
They built no pyramids whatsoever. Sorry, hate to burst that bubble, but boom, it's gone.
Well, I got nothing else to talk about, but anyway, no, I'm about that's.
Is a good movie, but it is pure and total fiction. Sorry. Yes. Stargate's
fiction, but Ancient Aliens. I mean, that's the truth, dude.
Nope,
that's
sorry. I would have to throw a flag on that play as well. Sorry.
Okay, well, yeah, big killjoy, you. Well, let's. First of all, let's start. What spurred your interest in Egypt? You're. Let's just face it. You're a long way from Egypt.
I am a long way from Egypt. That's true. That's kind of an interesting question. I don't know that I have a really rock-specific answer. I guess several things probably happened that brought that to bear. I was born in 1970, and of course in 1977, the treasures of Tutankhamun toured the United States. And that generated a great deal of interest and whatever, a great deal of attention to that subject. And somewhere around that time, I started going to the library. I was a patron of the Southland branch of the Lexington Public Library, what is now the Beaumont branch. And eventually, exhausted, I started reading the books in the children's section on Egypt, I guess. And then sometime, probably by the time I was 9 or 10, had exhausted that. And I started going upstairs to the adult section and checking out books. And I remember specifically there being a book that was largely pictures of the treasures of Tutankhamun. And I was hooked. I checked that out. I must have checked that book out a whole bunch of times. But I was hooked. And I can't explain it per se logically. It just simply fascinated me. Sometimes those connections just, well, there goes the dog. Uh-oh. Yeah, we're starting to get weather. He's like my own personal Bill Mack. Like I don't have to wonder when the weather's coming. Anyway, so it just started an interest that I've had since that time. I've always been interested in Egypt. I've developed a pretty large library of my own on the subject. Was fortunate enough in 2000 to travel to Egypt. So I've actually done the Nile tour from Cairo to Aswan and back. So, and at one point thought that I would pursue it as a profession, and decided after obtaining a master's in museum science and having completed by that point 7 years of higher education, that continuing for another 4 years or something at the rate of having to pay like $40,000 a year for education, at which point I would graduate to a job making $50,000 a year. That math didn't seem real sensible. So I decided I could be an Egyptologist on my own and do my own thing, and that's worked out pretty well. So kind of how I got there, I guess.
Now, first of all, there's just a buttload of jobs that you can go to college for and spend all that money and make and not make any money. So that's
that so is true. Well, I would say more jobs than not anymore, unfortunately.
Yeah,
probably the case.
Yeah, all of those art and drama majors out there that are working at McDonald's, we feel your pain. The now I do Egypt is, I've been watching, there's a lot of stuff on like Prime Video and stuff, but and of course now a lot of it, because I'm in the paranormal field, a lot of it does take that original slant that I threw out there. So I'm actually going to ask you a little bit about the pyramids themselves. Here's what the theory behind it is, as far as the alien, that it because we couldn't do it today. In other words, we couldn't build a pyramid if our lives depended on it. That there's just no freaking way that the people 8,000 years ago could have done it. What is your answer to that?
Well, I think my answer to that is severalfold. First of all, I'm not sure that it is true that we couldn't do it today. Yeah, it would be incredibly difficult. Yeah, we don't know all of exactly how the Egyptians did it. But when you consider the things that we do build, and there are some pretty amazing things out there, amazing structures, whether it's the Aswan Dam, which holds back the Nile, or the Hoover Dam in Las Vegas, or the Petronas Towers in Malaysia. I mean, we've built some pretty fantastic structures and do some pretty remarkable things. I think we could probably figure it out, and I think if you look at the archaeology and the engineering and some of the other things that have been done over the years, we have a pretty fair idea of how most of what was done was done. Furthermore, the builder's village is right there. It's been excavated. The quarries where both the building blocks and then the tufa limestone sheath stones were excavated are well known and well documented. So we just have all of the evidence for this being done and for these people doing it. I think you just have to recognize what it says about the tremendous power that the Pharaoh controlled. He could bring to bear that level, that quantity of labor, do something of that magnitude. It says something about who and what Pharaoh was. I think that's pretty incredible.
Now,
but it also
no, go ahead. It also
says something about the civilization and what they valued as a civilization, that they would put that level of effort into providing the mechanisms for people to go on into the afterlife and continue life eternally, essentially. So it says a lot about what that society was really about, that they built these structures.
Now, actually, what you just said was where I was going to next. Something that I don't guess it's a recent development, but something that was not commonly known, I don't think, until recently, is that the pyramids. I still think aliens helped. That being said, the village you were talking about, the builder's village that they've dug up. The thing is, this was not slave labor. My understanding is these people were there. They were basically, most of them were hired, but for lack of a better terminology. But they did this out of reverence to their pharaoh and to their gods. Correct?
I think that is very true. Yes, they certainly weren't slaves. That is absolutely unequivocally documented. They did it out of reverence, out of a belief that this was a way to guarantee their own afterlife, a way to do as the gods would have them do. They had a concept called Maat, M-A-A-T. Maat was represented by a feather. And when a person died, they went before Osiris, the judge of the dead, and their heart was placed on a scale on one pan, and Maat was placed on the other. And Maat meant right living a just, a proper, a moral, quality existence. And when those scales were balanced, if they balanced, then you had the opportunity to go on to the afterlife. If they did not balance, if your life outweighed Maat, if you did not live a good life, a just, right, moral life, then the eater of souls, a creature made of the most fierce parts of a number of fierce creatures, lion, hippopotamus, crocodile, would consume you. That was it. Done.
Yeah, so, they did have some wild gods.
Oh yeah, the Egyptians did. They have some wild animals that live in their region, and I think those animals inspired these beliefs or represented aspects of the gods that they wanted to emulate or to preserve. But I think the pyramids represent the devotion of the people to their leader and the belief system in which the people live. They also represent the reality of how life worked in Egypt. Life in ancient Egypt, and life in Egypt up until the building of the Aswan Dam 100 years ago, or 50 years ago, whenever that was, revolved around the cycles of the Nile. And so every year at a certain point, the Nile floods. And when that happens, all this rich soil from Central Africa washes across the Nile Valley and fertilizes that valley. Then you plant, and eventually you harvest. And between harvest and the flood, there's this whole period when there's really no agriculture to do. So there's a whole time period when you have all these people with really no occupation because there's no work to be done. The soil doesn't permit continued growth. So those people are now available and can be hired by Pharaoh or conscripted or whatever, put into service building Pharaoh's monuments. And so it represents that cycle that existed in ancient Egypt.
I've never heard it put like that with the whole agricultural aspect of it being, shut down. Now I feel lazy because these people in their spare time, people, they built pyramids. I'm lucky to get a nap taken. Now the one mistake, I don't know if people actually even think about it too much, but of course the 3 pyramids are the famous ones, the 3 great pyramids. But a couple quick questions before we actually get to the artifacts that you deal with. I want to know, do you know roughly how many pyramids have they actually found in Egypt?
I don't know an exact number, but it's in the dozens. Those are mostly in northern Egypt or between Giza, which is right across the river from Cairo, down to Memphis, Saqqara, that area. There are pyramids in places like the Sudan, Nubia, which is northern Sudan, the flooded Egypt. They copied that whole style. The whole culture developed there that was similar to, influenced by Egyptian culture. But the pyramids are mostly in northern Egypt. Like I say, I don't know exactly how many. One thing that's interesting about the pyramids is that they came in not a real short period of time, but when one considers the vast period of time over which Egyptian culture thrived, which you have to go back, the Great Pyramids of Egypt were built almost 5,000 years ago. It was almost 2,000 years later that Tut was buried. By that time, they're not doing pyramids anymore. They gave up pyramids fairly early on. What they figured out is if you build a great big giant monument, it's not hard to figure out where the king's stuff is, which is why they're generally all in.
I can see that. I can see that.
Place.
Yeah, I can see that.
Tombs that were a little harder to find. But the building of pyramids did take a tremendous amount of labor, and I think probably may not always have been possible, or they may have directed that labor into different things. For example, if you go to the Great Temple at Karnak, this is the largest religious edifice ever built by man under roof. It goes on for acres. It's gargantuan. It was not all built at once, but it was a gargantuan complex. That in itself is a tremendous concentration of labor. And you're talking about columns in some cases, 20, 25, 30 feet tall. Just massive stone architecture at this site. So they did continue on to build, they just didn't do it as pyramids.
Okay, everybody, we are going to take our first commercial break, and it's going to be a long one because we got all these sponsors to thank now. So I got stuff to do, but I wanted to put that out there. We'll be right back, and I'll go ahead and give you your first celebrity announcement after the commercial break. Thanks, everybody. You're watching Scarefest Radio. Do you feel lost in life? Do you seem to be stuck in emotions that are not yours? Is your home not the sanctuary it should be? Contact Spirit Mechanics, where they take a team approach to your metaphysical and spiritual problems. Spirit Mechanics specializes in aura cleansing, stone attunement, attachment removal, and house cleansings. Spirit Mechanics tailors their approach to your individual spiritual path and needs. Find them every month at Lexington, Kentucky's Mystical Fair, mysticalfairlex.com, or on Facebook by searching Spirit Mechanics. That's MECHANIX. Spirit Mechanics, for your spiritual health and well-being.
His body movement is unreal. That was awesome.
Body movements, yeah.
Just in time for a story.
Once upon a time, heaven was a tower tethered in its pride.
There are 3 acts scheduled for tonight's performance.
Thought the ink was dried, but hellish gardens flowered. Ivy to be climbed. Spread my filth, my wings, my weeds, my weeds.
My son. I know your people are gonna help me find him.
Answers wait inside, sir.
Did you see what those animals did to me?
Oh, yes, they can be so cruel.
Liar!
You said you trusted me.
I trust you.
What is this place? Who are you? I'm the excuse you give when you cannot follow the rules.
666. 666. 666.
Listen up, everyone. We're putting heaven out of business. Get ready for war.
Let me tell you a tale for a penny, one that you cannot hear anywhere else, not anywhere else. I heard from a birdie a dozen and birdie a dozen and well. No, it never ends well. Let me spin you a yarn for a cent. Lord, would it not be a sin for you to deny yourselves a taste?
We're in the Devil's Carnival! Welcome to Komodo's Carnival! You can't have no fun! Devil's Carnival!
And welcome back to Scarefest Radio, everybody. That's right. We have someone to announce. And the name is Darren Lynn Bausman. I'm hoping I'm saying his last name right. He's a director or producer. He's a little bit of acting, but he's known for Saw 2, Repo, the Genetic Opera, Abattoir, and the clip I just showed you there from Devil's Carnival. So coming to Scarefest 2018, Scarefest 11, Scarefest Rebirth, Darren Lynn Bausman, and got a little picture of him right there on the page. So we're rolling now. Everybody, our guest tonight is Eric Brooks. We're talking Egypt. Now, what is your Eric? What will you be speaking about specifically? I know you're not going to spend an hour like I just spent 15 minutes talking about the pyramids. What is your bent on bringing to Scarefest this year?
So what I am going to be speaking about, what I am putting together, is a presentation, PowerPoint primarily, that will look at the representation of Egypt in film, on the big screen, and on television, on the small screen. I had seen a lot of films that represented Egypt When I started this project, I found a few books that dealt with this subject, and I was kind of amazed there were books that dealt directly with it, but there are several, and was amazed at how many more films there were. So I've been watching a lot of films on Egypt, or that deal with Egypt as a subject. Of course, most of them are mummy films, because let's face it, that's the coolest way to deal with Egypt. But anyway, I will look at how Egypt has been represented, what those films say about the public's interest in Egypt. I'll talk about accuracy to some degree, but just a variety of representations that exist on both the big and small screen.
Culturally, do you feel like Hollywood has really, I almost want to say, put forth the effort? Because movies never get it right. But do you feel like in some of the more popular movies, of course, the Ten Commandments comes to mind, but the Mummy movies, we'll go with the Mummy movies. Do you feel like culturally they in any way reflected with any accuracy, Egypt?
Well, certainly some do, and many of them have elements that are accurate or drawn from actual Egyptology or Egyptian culture, Egyptian artifacts, etc. I wouldn't say that there are very many who get it really completely right. It's just not generally the major concern of the producers of movies, mummy movies in particular, to really worry about getting it culturally correct. Some, like I say, seem to have had more concern for that than others. And it's interesting what tidbits they choose to throw in there that they refer to, sometimes without necessarily seeming to mean to, but it is interesting what is in there. The biggest thing that I find interesting about mummy films and films about Egypt in general, when you talk about getting it right, is that there are really no Egyptian actors in any of these films, and very few actors who are people even from, say, North Africa, maybe the Levant, places where they may have cultural connections to Egypt or look like Egyptians. So one of the weird things about these films, and I think in some ways unfortunate thing, is that they deal with the culture without having anyone that can accurately really represent that culture. I mean, it's a cultural appropriation by European people primarily, people with European ancestry, for the benefit, it appears to me, of European people for the most part. And that's who's in the film. And most of them deal with the whole idea of Europeans versus mummies, I guess you would say.
Well, I agree. Although I was going to say, to me, I just assumed it was for the American audience, and we just assume that everyone in the world either speaks English or speaks English with an English accent. And all the mummy films that come to mind, most of the characters are, if they're not British, they're at least speaking with a British accent, because that's how people in Egypt talk, right?
Right, exactly. That's basically what it comes down to, right there.
Now, one of the things, I understand that the Egyptian culture back in the time we're talking about, before they spent like 200-300 years. Christianity was the big religion in Egypt, is my understanding. But before that, when we had all these gods, I understand they've cataloged, documented, like, okay, and one thing I saw said 1,000, another one said close to 2,000 gods that these people, in one aspect or another, worshipped. Is that what your research has brought to fore?
I don't know how many total gods there are. There are a number of really important gods, or major gods, or gods that you usually see referred to. Another thing that makes it complicated is that the Egyptians were fond of combining gods. So, for example, you have a god Ra, the god of the sun, sort of father of the gods. Then you have Horus, falcon god. Pharaoh is considered the living Horus, the living embodiment of Horus, son of Osiris. You can combine those into a god called Re Harakati, which is a combination that has aspects of both of the other gods. So there are a whole lot of those sorts of combinations. There are also a lot of gods where, for example, Bast is the cat goddess, is a goddess of a home, of somewhat of protection. Her fiercer aspect, the warrior aspect, is called Sekhmet, the lion goddess. So it's hard to say exactly. I mean, are those two different gods, or are those simply manifestations or aspects of one god? Like I say, there are principal pantheons, but there were lots of local gods and goddesses, sub-gods and goddesses, that sort of thing. So yeah, it's a very, very large pantheon.
Now that's you kind of touched on it there. Do we find, okay, we've got half a dozen, whatever the big gods are. Were the lesser known gods, I think that was the name of a movie, were they more a regional thing, or did time have more of an effect on that? You talk about the combination of two gods. Was that so-and-so village because they just didn't want to build two temples, or was it something that they evolved into?
Some of both. There were local gods. If you go back far enough, before the first pharaoh to unify Egypt was a man called Narmer, who was known from a thing called a pallet, which is a thing it's a stone, flat stone thing with images of animals and things on it, and an image of Narmer with a mace on the back. And it's got a small sort of a dish area that you use to grind up cosmetics. Anyway, Narmer unified as Egypt. Prior to that, Egypt is a series of smaller kingdoms, smaller local areas under local rulers. And in a lot of these areas, they have their own gods and goddesses. So when Egypt is unified, there are certain gods and goddesses that become important across the whole nation. Osiris, Isis, Horus, Thoth, Ka, Ra, Nephthys, Neith, Geb, Nut. And there's a whole bunch of them that become popular and become important across the country. But there are still smaller regional gods and goddesses in areas where they developed independently earlier and remain as important to the people in that area.
Or, as those of us in the nerd world call them, the Goa'uld. Stargate reference here. Anyway, we're gonna have another commercial break, everybody. You're watching Scarefest Radio.
Coyote Chris Sutton.
Shamanism.
Spiritual advisement.
Paranormal investigations.
Inspirational presentations.
Bringing light to the darkest places for over 20 years. Go to coyotechris.com to learn more.
And welcome back to Scarefest Radio. Let's go ahead and do another celebrity announcement. Everybody coming to Scarefest 2018, Scarefest 11, Scarefest Rebirth, Nicholas Vince. Not to be confused with Circus Envy. Nicholas Vince. He's an actor. Hellraiser, Hellbound, Hellraiser 2, and Nightbreed. Among Mindless was another one. So we've got Nicholas Vince coming. You can see him up on the screen there. And so there's our 2 celebrity announcements for tonight. And there are more coming. Calm down. We're not done yet. I'll give you an example of how this whole contract thing works. The 2 celebrities I announced tonight were actually confirmed, as in released for announcement, March or April. I'd have to look to be sure, but March or April. But they were not completely nailed down until just lately. So that's how tedious this is to get this stuff nailed down for a small convention like the Scarefest. When I say small, I mean compared to, Dragon Con or Wizard World or something. We don't have a team of lawyers working on this 24/7. So just so you know. But there's our celebrity announcements for tonight. Darren Lynn Bousman and Boosman. I've got somebody tell me. Somebody send me a message recorded on the correct way to say his name. And Nicholas Vince. There are our celebrity announcements tonight. Now, a side note. Because of the weather, someone in the chat room earlier said, you two be sure, if the weather gets bad, to hunker down. Someone Google me the origins of hunker. That is not a word you use in any other aspect of life other than that phrase. That's the only way I've ever heard the word hunker, is if you hunker down. So I am curious as to where that word come from. I'm not making up any words this week that I know of. So now I just want to know the origins of a word that that we do occasionally use. So I do want to thank Wicked World. Of course, we've also got a promo we've been playing for the Rotting Rampage, but Wicked World is the official scare of the Scarefest. And always, we do owe a lot of gratitude to Ghost Hunt Weekends. Ghost Hunt Weekends, the official ghost hunt of the Scarefest. Supplier, host, whatever the hell you want to call them, of all of the Scarefest celebrity ghost hunts. So they are on board this year, and we want to give them a big shout out. Be sure when you talk to them to say, hey, I heard it on Scarefest Radio. Back to our guest, Eric Brooks. Now, one of the things that was mentioned in the bio, assuming that it's even remotely accurate, something about artifacts. Are these movie artifacts that you've come across, been able to acquire, or what are we talking about when we talk about artifacts?
I'm trying to remember what was mentioned in the bio about artifacts. And they referenced artifacts. One of the things I will talk about is the use of artifacts in the film, because one of the things that's interesting when you watch these films, mummy films, etc., especially someone like me, having read the books on the subject and now having had the opportunity to visit Egypt and other locations, see some of these things. What they've done, a lot of the prop people, set design people, those kinds of folks, have basically replicated stuff that are well-known or easily locatable Egyptian artifacts. You watch a lot of the mummy movies, a lot of the stuff that you see in the mummy's tomb, or that you see in the home of the archaeologist that the mummy is sort of after for violating the tomb or whatever, are replicas of artifacts from, say, King Tut's tomb. Mm-hmm. And there's, I believe it's the 1959 Hammer film, the Scroll of Life or something, is kept in this cartouche-shaped box. This box is literally an exact copy of a box found in King Tut's tomb. So that, to me, is pretty cool. And I've kind of gotten now where, when I watch these things, one of the things I do is sit there and go, that's a King Tut piece, or, oh, I saw that in such-and-so museum, or, I think that's real, I'll have to check that out. So if you can make a game of that, if you want to work at it, or look at some of that kind of stuff beforehand, look at, catalogs of Egyptian artifacts, that kind of thing.
Now, I don't remember what movie it was for sure. I don't think it was the Ten Commandments, because the Ten Commandments, well, they dug up practically the entire set not long ago, found it just laying out in the desert somewhere. So it might have been one of the original The Mummy movies. But I read somewhere that one of these movies, because Egyptian artifacts on the black market were so easy to come by for a while before it really got under control, that one of these movies, they actually found out that in this set, or in this, in the studio back lot, they actually had real Egyptian crap laying around that should have been returned, that was highly valuable and not counterfeit, not reproductions. Have you turned up anything about that?
I don't recall that specifically. I'll have to look into that. That's an interesting question, and it would be interesting to know. I do not recall specifically a reference to actual Egyptian artifacts, but it certainly could have happened. The rules for those kinds of things, up until the discovery of King Tut's tomb particularly, were such that typically the archaeologists who would have been working perhaps for a museum or a university would get 50%, and the Egyptian government would get 50%. And of course, certain times even before that, stuff just went and nobody was really sure where it went. But, those kinds of rules were in place. When Howard Carter discovered King Tut's tomb, the Egyptian government immediately said, oh, well, sorry, we didn't expect it to be that. So now that we know that that's all there, we're taking 100%. And he did take a few things home. There are a few things in England that he brought back, but that changed the way that sort of thing was handled. And they took much more of the artifacts were retained in Egypt, and of course now today they retain everything, not even a question. So anyway, it would certainly be possible. Many artifacts were available on the market right up through the early 20th century, and in fact there's still a market for artifacts. You can still buy artifacts pretty easily. The houses that deal in them and that sort of thing. So it would certainly be within the bounds of possibility.
I to go off topic a little bit here, I have to say, the Google is strong with our fans. Everybody, this Scarefest Radio has become a learning experience for everyone. We actually have the official definitions from like 3 different dictionaries posted in the chat room, and I understand even on Facebook. So there's your education night. But the online dictionary, to hold resolutely, hunker is to hold resolutely or stubbornly to a policy, opinion. That doesn't make sense with hunker down, though. I don't. In other words, okay, but hunker apparently is a real word that some redneck in Kentucky did not just throw into hunker down to describe how to duck your head. So I wanted to get that in there. We're going to go ahead and pop in our final commercial break before the end of the show. Everybody, you're watching Scarefest Radio.
Wildcat Moving is a locally owned and operated company. Wildcat Moving is the top-ranked moving company in the state on Angie's List. We hire young, athletic guys and get the job done faster than anybody in the business. We start the clock when we get to your door, when we arrive on site, and we stop the clock when we're completely finished at the final location. We guarantee our guys are going to work as hard as possible from the moment they arrive at your door until they're completely finished. For more information, please call or visit our website today.
And welcome back to Scarefest Radio. Our guest tonight is Eric Brooks. We're in our final segment now. I do hope all the social media feeds are working because these little warning labels keep popping up on the console, but most of them just, they don't mean anything. In other words, they're showing online, they're just showing warning. I have no freaking idea. It's, we need to add somebody else to the payroll. Brandon Griffith needs to sell another kidney. That's just all there is to it. To get me somebody to actually run that part of the production. Now, Eric, on the topic of artifacts, let's go ahead and just take it a Scarefest bent here. Okay, no aliens. Okay, fine, no aliens. What? The other thing that Egypt, as far as the artifacts and everything are known for, and the mummies and the sarcophagi. I think that's plural of sarcophagus, is, if it's not, I just made up my word for the week. The curses. Now, of course, this was, a very religious thing, but just between you and me, buddy, do you put any stock in the curses on the artifacts and stuff, the real deal?
Not really. I don't think there's any real evidence to suggest that they work. I would say this. I think if you understand why the Egyptians would apply a curse to a tomb, the notion that when the Egyptians buried their dead in the way that they buried their dead, with all of the things that they were buried, that the purpose for that was to ensure the possibility of living eternally in the afterlife. It would seem to me that I would want to respect the curse if for no other reason than not to take the chance of condemning some Egyptian to a non-afterlife by violating their tomb. I think, we've certainly done that, and there's a lot of information we've gained. Much of what we know about ancient Egypt we've learned from tombs, because that's simply what we found the most of, what they've left behind. But there's good reason to understand why the curses would have been used, and there are curses, which again are designed to protect the contents of the tomb, protect the dead, ensure the dead have the opportunity to have a peaceful afterlife, etc.
Okay, back to movies now. We're towards the end of the show, so let's just kind of do some movies. What is your favorite Egyptian movie? And I'm assuming because most of your stuff goes mummy direction, it's probably going to be one of those. But if you had to tell the Scarefest listeners and viewers to watch one mummy movie, what's your favorite?
Well, the movie I would say, if you're going to watch only one, or if you can find it and watch it, the one that's in some ways the most interesting and important, is a film that is very hard to find. You can find it on YouTube. I don't think it exists on Blu-ray or DVD, maybe even on video cassette for that matter. It's a film that was made in 1968 or 9 in Egypt called Night of Counting the Years. And this particular film is based on a true story. In the 1880s, a family by the name of Al-Rasul in southern Egypt, Luxor, just by accident discovered a tomb in the Valley of the Kings. And in this tomb were a number of mummies. And I don't remember, 20 or 30, I think. It was a fairly substantial number. And a lot of other things. And so this family was, working class, farming type family, not a well-off family. What they decided was that they had discovered a way to live a life of greater means. And so what they would do is periodically take things out of the tomb and sell them on the antiquities market. And it became known to the antiquities authorities in Egypt that all of these really incredible pieces related to some very important pharaohs were coming out of this area of Egypt. And eventually the authorities figured that there had to be a common source to this. All these things that were coming out had to go back to some source. And so they opened an investigation and eventually were able to track it back to this family. When they did that, they were then able to go to this tomb, and they opened this tomb, and therein were some of the most important mummies in all of Egyptian history. Ramses the Great, his father, Seti I, and a whole bunch of other mummies from that period of Egyptian history were found in this tomb in a place called Ir al-Bahri in Egypt. It's a fascinating film, beautifully shot, very atmospheric. It was shot on location in Luxor, in Thebes, in the Valley of the Kings. Everybody in it is Egyptian. Even the people playing Europeans are Egyptian, which is a kind of cool twist. I mean, you see Gaston Maspero, the French Director General of Antiquities, played, I'm pretty sure, by an Egyptian. That's a pretty cool thing. But it's a really beautiful film. Like I say, very hard to find, not well known. The title comes from a chapter or book within the Book of the Dead. So it's just a really neat film to see. So that's the one that, to me, I think people need to see, because it gives you a greater understanding of the whole concept of Egyptology and power of ancient Egypt, etc.
Now, what was the name of that? The Night of, what was that?
Night of Counting the Years.
Night of Counting the Years.
Yes. You can also find it under the title Al-Mumiyya or The Mummy. If you look up Mummy 1968, it might come up, because it was released under these other titles. And obviously, in America or in Europe or whatever, you're probably going to get more people to come out to the theater to see a film called The Mummy than you are a film called Night of Counting the Years. So anyway, it is a really neat.
It does kind of sound like a chick flick when you call it that. Now, second question, same genre. What is the biggest piece of trash that you've had to sit through during your research?
Oh, that one's an easy one. There is no question about that one. The 2017 version of The Mummy.
I knew it! I knew it!
I watched it. I'm going to say it now. All of the Scarefest fans out there, don't bother. I'll talk about it in my presentation. I have done the work for you. Just leave it alone. Don't go there.
Now, one I do want to ask you about, I don't know if you've seen it or not. I thought it was beautifully shot, beautifully rendered, but I realized it was purely fiction. But that was Gods of Egypt. Really about the same time as that movie there. Have you seen that one?
I have. I actually just watched it again recently. I like Gods of Egypt in the sense that it does actually do some neat things with Egyptian mythology and get some of it right. I have a really big problem with it, though, which makes it hard for me to watch. There are a lot of actors in there that I really like. It's not that I don't like them as actors. It's not that they're not good actors.
But they're frickin' British. But they're frickin' British.
Yeah, I'm sorry. A Scottish guy playing Set, that's just not right. There is, I think, one, maybe two. One I can think of for sure, African-American, who plays one of the guys. There have to have been more actors that they could have gotten. I mean, I can think of a lot of actors they could have gotten to play these roles that would have been of African extraction or something. I mean, it would have been closer to Egyptian than the people they got. And that, I think, is really, really unfortunate. That's a cultural appropriation at its worst. And it makes it very hard to watch that film in good faith and feel that you're watching something worth seeing.
I fully understand. I think we're pretty much at the end of the show. I think I've gotten through everything. Hope everybody, I hope everything worked okay. This was our first test tonight of the new broadcast software to get it out on all of these social media feeds. Eric, I want to thank you for coming on. Everybody, Eric will be speaking at the Scarefest this year. Scarefest 2018, September 14th through 16th in Lexington, Kentucky. Go to thescarefest.com for more information about the entire convention. And of course, now what's the actual title of your seminar, Eric?
It is called Gifts of the Nile, Egypt in Television and Film. And I want to thank you for having me. This has been great. I've enjoyed it very, very much. And I appreciate the opportunity to be here and look forward to seeing everyone at Scarefest.
Yeah, I'm going to confess something, Eric. It was a much easier show to do than I thought it would be because I know so damn little about Egypt once you get outside of Stargate. Stargate SG-1. That's all I know. That's that's pretty much that and Ancient Aliens. I'm done. So everybody, this has been Scarefest Radio. Once again, we announced Darren Lynn Bausman. We announced Nicholas Vince. We will have more announcements for you. I want to thank the sponsors of the Scarefest for coming aboard. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in.